Welcome to the Trusted Advisor podcast, where you get a deep dive into the world of financial planning with industry leaders who share their stories of winning and learning as they charted their path to success. This podcast is for the curious, those of you that like to dig into the detail. If that sounds like you, get ready to listen and learn.
Welcome to the Trusted Advisor podcast. Today, we're exploring the rise of outsourcing in financial planning, a trend that's reshaping how many businesses manage their back office operations. In recent years, financial planners have increasingly turned to outsourcing for tasks like paraplanning and client administration. But how do you decide if it's right for your business? And what can you expect from this approach? In this episode, I sit down with Jerry Kalogeropoulos, Managing Partner at Aptium Assist, an outsourced back office support provider specialising in financial planning firms. Jerry shares valuable insights on how outsourcing can transform operations, reduce key person risk, and allow financial planners to focus on higher value tasks. We dive into how Aptium Assist integrates with financial planning practices by embedding their team into existing workflows rather than treating tasks individually. The onboarding process and workflow management strategies, including documenting and optimising workflows for smoother operations, security measures and confidentiality practices that ensure data protection, crucial in today's regulatory environment, the financial and operational benefits of outsourcing from boosting profitability to enhancing client experience, and best practices for starting small with outsourcing and key factors to consider when deciding which tasks to keep in-house. Whether you're new to outsourcing or looking to improve your existing approach, this episode is packed with practical advice and insights that will help you assess how outsourcing could benefit your business. Let's get started. Welcome, Jerry Kalogeropoulos, to the Trusted Advisor podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Today, Jerry, we're going to dive into a trend that's been really reshaping professional financial services firms in recent years, the trend towards offshoring or outsourcing some of the back office functions that we operate inside our financial planning businesses, whether it be paraplanning, whether it be client services administration work. It's something that you at Aptium Assist have begun to do in the business you're currently in, but beyond your business, and offer that service to others. Though we're not using your services yet, I'm very keen to explore it further with you.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, first of all, congratulations for doing this podcast. I think this kind of thing from practitioners to begin with is such a cool thing, given that you're in there in the trenches, doing it day to day and taking time out of your day job to give something back to the advice community. And I think the nature of this sort of podcast is such that you're going to be asking pretty similar questions to many of the advisors listening in. So well done for that to begin with. But yeah, so thanks for having me again. I run Aptium Assist, and we're a little bit of a unique, I'll say, outsourced provider in that, as you kind of intimated, we never set out to build an outsourced business. We were an advice business to begin with. We had a scenario that I think many listeners might have faced over the course of their working lives, where key people left or were at risk of leaving our business, and they were critical to getting work flowing in our practice, and we couldn't afford to lose them. So that was the catalyst really for us starting an outsourced business. We had a key person that was moving back to Vietnam for family reasons. He wanted to start his family. We offered him that opportunity to continue on as an employee of the practice, and that led to sort of one thing and another from there.
Okay, so obviously you've got a bit of experience with this in the business at Aptium and now for other businesses. What specific tasks have you found are the most efficiently handled by your offshore team in Vietnam?
It's a good question, and one that, look, from my perspective, probably helps to differentiate the different categories of outsourced providers. I think on the one hand, most outsourced providers look at things from that perspective, from a very task-driven point of view of, you want a plan done, an SOA or an ROA, fill in your order form, there's a task, job done. You want some admin done? Okay, well, that's something different. We'll get a person to do either implementation work or general admin or whatever else it might be. We're different in that we came at this from a very, very advice-focused point of view, in that we didn't really think about one task or the next sitting with one person or the next. We just knew that we had to get our advisors ready for a review and out the other side. So there was work that needed to be done to get an advisor prepped for a review meeting or a new client meeting. And there was also work on the other side of it. And, at the end of the day, being an advice business, we don't have time for order forms or saying, okay, well, this person just does this task. and that person just does that task. We kind of need a team to be getting stuff done together. And so from our point of view, I mean, any task can be offshored if you've got the right people doing it and if it's organized in the right sort of way.
Okay, so different in the sense that you, instead of focusing on a task by task specific approach, you really have thought about, we just need them to be a part of our team, and we'll build our processes and they will form a part of our team to support those processes. So can you walk us through a typical workflow then between your team and, say, a local financial planning business? How do you ensure that communication and task management is seamless? Not that it's ever seamless, even when people are in your office, but how do you work with your team offshore to make that communication effective?
Good question. I think the starting point is really to understand any client that we take on. We spend a really good long while understanding their current workflow to begin with. We take the time to actually document their workflow in our own workflow management system. And the reason we do that could, that's a bit of duplication right there. And from a practice's point of view, that's, you might be scratching your head going, well, hold on, we've already got our workflow documented. Why would you copy and paste that in a different workflow management system? Well, the reason for that is that we need our staff to follow your bouncing ball, and not just one staff member, but we need a backup to the backup to the backup. If someone gets hit by a bus or if they need to take a holiday, we need to know that every process is documented. So that's step one. Step two is we make sure that there is never a key person risk or dependence on one person that's working with one practice for a similar sort of an obvious reason. The best example I can give you in terms of how the workflow would work is, okay, advisor needs to get ready for a review meeting. Clients coming in next week, they would let our team offshore know that they've got a review meeting on Thursday next week. That's it in terms of what the advisor needs to do. I've got a meeting. It's happening on Thursday. Guys, get me ready. Now, typically, one of our staff members would, and this would be a paraplanner that would do this, they would go and, subject to the workflow processes that advisor has got us to subscribe to, they would, for example, get your platform reports ready for the advisor, for the client coming in. They would potentially do some product comparisons in terms of platforms. They would look at the research ratings of any direct equities and things like that to understand what's changed prior to the client coming in. They would get their fee forms ready in terms of platform, if that's how you charge, or direct fees, if that's how you charge, whatever it might be, and so on and so forth. So they would do literally everything it takes to get that advisor prepped. And what we call that review pack would be ready for them to inspect prior to the review. The advisor would then go into the review prepared. And once they've done a reasonable file note, and I stress reasonable because we're not mind readers, but if there's a reasonable file note there on file, we will pick that up and produce advice from that. Now, that in and of itself is quite different in the sense that we're trying really, really hard to not be order takers. And we are certainly trying to get advisors to not be order makers, because that process of actually documenting what the advice you want can be pretty time consuming for advisors. They've sort of gone a third of the way to producing the advice themselves. So once that advice has been prepared in whatever form the advice practice needs, that paraplanner, so the same person is following this review process all the way along here. They would know the advice is ready. The advisor has said, yep, happy with that. They would go in there and implement the new, contingent on the sort of fee model and whether it's fixed term agreements or whatever else it might be. They would get into Xplan or whatever software you're using and tie off that case, is what we term that, and begin the new case for that client for the next year. They'd make any changes to Xplan, so updating, income, address, whatever else it might be, and sort of tie off that end-to-end review process. So basically do everything other than implement the advice. That's probably a bit more similar to, I would say, now it's not exactly the same. I'm not going to pretend that we're the same as having staff in-house, but what we're trying to do is get our team over there to mimic what it would be if you had someone in the office. So if you had a paraplanner in the office, it's up to you as the advice team what you want that paraplanner to do. You're not going to get your paraplanner to give you an order form to fill in to produce advice. You're going to expect that person understands enough that they can produce advice off fairly minimal instructions, that they're there for you if you want to have a chat and talk strategy at any given moment in time, that it's not a rigid sort of relationship. And given that's how we started our outsourced business, they were our back office because we're an advice business, obviously, to begin with. We kind of pass on that that level of expectation to every practice we work with.
Okay. Jerry, I've got a ton of questions off the back of that. First of all, the onboarding, you talk about taking our process or taking the business's process that you're going to be working with and putting it into your practice management system, your workflow system. Can you first of all tell us which system you use and tell us about what sort of investment is someone making for that? Because obviously you're doing a fair bit of a lift there to get someone else's process and put it into your systems, much like a financial planner would prepare a plan and be a fee for that plan, and then there's an ongoing service fee beyond that. Do you charge for that onboarding process, or is it one flat ongoing fee and the onboarding is kind of just built into that process? And so I'll let you answer those two questions before I ask the rest in my mind.
No, that's okay. I think there were three there, so I'll try and tackle all three in order. So the first was, what do we use? So we use Monday.com as our workflow management tool. There is nothing fancy about it. They're a listed business. They're going to be around. If we needed to move to a different workflow management system, it's not a drag for us. So we use Monday.com specifically and not Xplan, for example, because Xplan just is not good at workflow. I think most people would agree at that. Excellent for projections and modeling and the rest. It's just not a workflow management system. So we're not a big fan of tasks and threads. A lot of the work we do is helping practices get off that system of workflow if they choose. So we use Monday. Do we charge for onboarding? No, we don't. We back ourselves to deliver value up front. And I'm going to say 9 out of 10 of our clients, we don't do sort of 30 odd plans a year. They don't sort of send us their overflow or just their new clients or just their risk only clients or whatever it might be. We run their business. We do everything. And that, I guess, is another difference in terms of your typical outsourced business. I think you'd get a bit of a hodgepodge of the sort of work that they do, whereas we're a lot smaller, but a lot deeper in terms of the sort of work that we're doing with practices. So we work with fewer practices, but we basically run the majority of their back offices. And that means you have to invest up front in getting workflow right. Part of it's, Monday.com is like I said at the beginning, it's nothing special. And we're not doing anything that is difficult here. All we're doing is taking the time up front to do the little things right and set the foundation right in whatever system you choose, whether it's Monday or Asana or whatever else. It doesn't really matter. The thing that we're doing right, though, is that we're executing it. So we're getting processes right up front. We're getting communication right. So we will have, if need be, we'll have daily catch-up meetings with practices. We'll set them up on Teams, preferably. So if you're a Microsoft business, that's great for you. If not, we'll use whatever else you prefer. But ideally, Teams, we'll set up a group. So quick chit-chat between your onshore and your offshore team is really, really easy. They're accessible all the time. And the key is, once you've bedded down processes and you've got that, follow the bouncing ball kind of model built, it's just all about communication and executing from there. So hopefully that answers your questions.
Yeah, for sure it does. And do you find businesses need to have someone on site locally to kind of be the contact point for the offshore team? Do you find your client services managers perhaps built into the local financial planning business, they have one of their back office team and they're the ones doing the primary connecting?
I advocate for that. So I think that is the better way to do it. We do that in our own advice business. So I'm general manager of the outsourced business, but I'm also GM of our advice business, completely sort of separate hats. And that's how we choose to do things, actually, in our advice business. We do look after some sole operators that just prefer to deal with no one. They don't like employing staff. And that's a unique example. But I'd say for any business of, any substantial size, the best model, in my opinion, is to have I would call them the air traffic controllers onshore. They're the people that we can liberate of basically all work and get them focused on coordinating between the advice team in your business and us offshore. They can focus more on clients, do more proactive work with clients. And we're not about making people's roles redundant. I think, the whole idea of just outsourcing is a fallacy. I think there's a really good hybrid model, which you've just sort of touched on.
When we spoke a month or two ago, maybe a couple of months ago now, Jerry, you, myself and your business partner, Phil, had a chat about what you were doing. And at the time asking you, how do people normally on board with you? And some people go the whole way from go to woe. But you also suggested that some firms initially begin almost toe in the water. They start to do some component parts. There's maybe an overflow. But what you found is that the more they got used to and comfortable with what you can do, that you've actually found that the services then expand. They've taken more and more of what you can do for them. Can you give us a bit of a perspective on that and how businesses have perhaps started by testing the waters and how that's developed for those businesses?
Yes. So again, I'm an advocate for not going the whole hog, but testing any outsourced provider, whether it's us or anyone else. I would never suggest that a practice say, well, do you know what? I'm just going to outsource all my paraplanning tomorrow and off we go, fingers crossed. Now, having said that, I've seen my first example of that happen within our own outsourced business. So we're into month 2 now of working with a practice that decided that they wanted us to manage 320 of their clients end to end. So doing all of their review prep, all of their plans. They're holding on to admin in-house for now, but they're sort of talking about getting some support for that in the new year as well. So I've never seen that before. That's the first example I've seen of a business sort of flicking the switch and saying, right, we're just going to go the whole hog. Now, it's worked okay. It hasn't been perfect. I would still say that the toe in the water first is a better way to do it. This was a bit of a unique scenario, but I've now seen it all. I've seen that, and it can be done, but it's not ideal. So almost all of our practices that we look after started off in a variety of different scenarios. So it could have been that they got us doing admin only, so just a dedicated admin person. It could have been that they got us doing a portion of their plans, be it new clients, or I think the most common example would be new business. I think there's a perception out there with advisors that that's the most heavy lifting. They're the most difficult plans to put together. So we'll give you that stuff. And that's fine. We're not fussed about that. But yeah, I'd say 8 or 9 out of 10 of our clients that started off that way, we now more or less do everything for.
Is part of that perhaps preference to sort of onboard, not just a preference for the firm to dip the toe in the water, but also perhaps a preference on your end? I mean, you said you've just done one that's a 320, the whole shooting match in one go. But is part of that preference on your end as well, because you've naturally got to resource that. And so how do you resource something with that forward planning when it's going from where you are to plus 320 effectively in a short space of time? You've been able to do it. You've clearly got the ability to adapt to that. So can you share a bit about how you resource on your side, and how do you train the next generation of people coming through in Vietnam to make sure there is resourcing there?
To answer your question, honestly, absolutely yes. So it is my preference to do it sort of toe in the water first, because I think it's better for us and it's better for the advice business. It's definitely better for us, not in terms of not in the sense of we can't resource it. We can resource it. So this 320 client, we did that just fine. And we are employing in the order of 3 to 4 people a month in Ho Chi Minh City. But the reason it's better for us is different. It's not about can we do the work. It's can we do the work to the standard that I want to do the work. And so our in-house training system is pretty simple and a bit surprising, I would say. Some people look at it and go, you guys are mad for doing this. But the way we work is we will take on new employees and we will unleash them on our own practice. So our advice business is the training ground. Now, we don't mind if people get things wrong on us because, we'll fix it. We'll sort it out. We're not going to get cranky at people getting things wrong. And it's part of the cost of what we do. So all of our new staff get unleashed on our practice. Once we get them to a sufficient standard that we think they know what they're doing, then they're fine to be released onto other businesses. So there's an immediate level of competence that we're assessing in-house first. And then invariably we lose our staff to other businesses. And that's just the way it goes.
Wow. That's a big sacrifice you're making there for your own financial planning business.
It is. But I mean, we've got at any one point 9 people just in the paraplanning team working just on our practice. So we've got like 550 clients. Now, those 9 people are not working full-time on our practice, right? They're all working mainly on our practice, but then on 1 or 2 others as well. But, there's that core team that's there that allows us to get on with our work, and our expectations are high. I mean, our practice is no cookie cutter advice business. We're not doing, throwing clients into, a master trust and then not looking at them for another 12 months. All of our clients basically, except for 100 of the smaller ones, are sitting in wrap accounts with bespoke portfolios, a combination of direct equities and ETFs and managed funds and whatever else. And they all look a little bit different. We're reviewing them sometimes more than once a year. So there is complexity in the advice business. And that automatically means that when new staff get, unleashed on our business, they're going to learn really quickly. They don't have a choice. So the learning curve is steep and needs to be fairly quick.
And as you said there, you're not going from 0 to 1 to 0 again. You're going from a team that's adding people in and some are progressing through. So speaking of zeros and ones, how do you manage that question that everyone will have around data security and client confidentiality? Obviously we're working with an offshore team, and that's not new. That's been done for many years by major corporations, and now much more recently and extensively by small and mid-market financial planning, accounting, mortgage brokers, the like. How do you handle that question when people say, how do we ensure our data is secure? And how do we not just ensure it's secure, but how do we prove that it is secure if we ever get queried around how we're managing privacy?
That's probably the number one question we get from people, to be honest. Look, there's different ways to answer that question. So you could say, we subscribe to, an ISO standard around data security and therefore we're okay, or whatever it might be, or we've got these wonderful cyber standards. The truth of the matter is there are a couple of very practical things that you need to be doing first and foremost in order to, irrespective of whatever policies and standards and whatever else you subscribe to, there are basic things you need to be doing regularly. The first is, using client portals, not emailing client information back and forth as much as possible. Obviously, you're using the source of truth being Xplan to save documents to, so you're not actually emailing anything, or using OneDrive or whatever secure software you've got in terms of not moving data anywhere other than where it needs to go, I should say. The second is really testing our staff constantly. So peppering them, and I'm talking every month here, I'm not talking once or twice a year, but peppering them on basic standards. So knowing not to click on suspicious links, knowing how to look out for really basic sort of phishing attacks or whatever else it might be, understanding what a scam actually looks like. Because I've worked in a previous life in practice management for 15 years, and I've seen advisors get it wrong. I've seen pretty smart humans, click on the wrong thing. I've seen email accounts hacked and hackers tracking emails back and forth and then communicating with clients, pretending they're the advisor and getting funds diverted and all sorts of stuff. So I think if you're getting the basics right and you're diligent around that, that's step number one. Then in terms of the policy stuff and, the measures we've got, obviously all of our staff have got company issued devices. They're working from the office. They're not sitting in some random place at home on their own laptop. So our staff sit in a centralized location in one office in Ho Chi Minh City. We have constant monitoring of all of their devices. They're disabled, obviously, for thumb drives and the rest. We've got a security team that are looking at our stuff on site. So I've got a Teams group with the security team, and we're constantly back and forth on a variety of matters. We also, because our heritage is from a big licensee, for many of your listeners there that are self-licensed, that have come from licensee land, you'll probably know that the requirements of big licensees these days in terms of cybersecurity are extreme. So there have been court cases where licensees have been caught out by ASIC on breaches of data security. And as a result of those, they've come down like a ton of bricks on the sorts of measures you need to have in place. Now, as an outsourced business, we are an approved provider to one of the biggest licensees in the country. And we've had to go through a pretty rigorous vendor management process to show that we're fit for purpose. And so there's stuff like that, just by the course of things and the way that we operate and the fact we happen to be licensed with a big licensee, the standards we operate to, I'm going to say probably higher than the vast majority of your listeners in terms of what you think needs to happen.
And so obviously there's privacy and data security, but also just within our industry, there are so many changes to the way in which advice is being delivered, legislative change that forces that upon us, and the compliance requirements that go around that. How do you help keep your team up to speed with the back office sort of service standards that they're going to meet the regulatory environment that we work in? What's the process you follow there?
A similar sort of answer to the previous question. The fact that we happen to be an advice business as well is very, very helpful. So I'd say most outsourced providers that, they've been formed in order to provide a service or a widget or whatever to financial advisors, they would probably have a harder time than we would keeping up with legislative change because it's part of what we do day to day as advisors as well as outsourced providers. So yeah, it's a pretty simple process there. It's a hand in glove scenario between the advice business and the outsourced business. And of course, we do work across multiple licensees and self-licensed businesses. So some of what we do, a lot of, I guess, what we work with as an advice business is templated. So the change is in fact managed by the big licensee, whereas for self-licensed businesses, you've got to do that yourself. And you need to have someone, be it your legal firm or whoever you've got helping you run your license to keep up with change. Yeah, it's a bit more of a no-brainer on my side
Yeah, for sure. And that makes perfect sense. So from your experience, both at Aptium, your business, as well as now seeing it for other businesses that you're supporting through Aptium Assist, what are you seeing as some of the key benefits planners experience when they outsource back office functions? You talked about profitability when we caught up. So do you want to just talk to that question? So what are you seeing people get as a benefit from this process of offshoring and outsourcing some of those core back office functions?
I think the starting point for a lot of advisors might be that, I want a cheaper way of doing things. So, chasing profit is just one reason why people pursue outsourcing. But I actually think that the better benefit from what I can see is that advisors, once they're using an outsourced business that works, it can be us or anyone else, it doesn't really matter. But what it really means is that you can go to sleep at night not fearing, gosh, what happens if so-and-so quits? What happens if someone gets hit by a bus? It's that management of key person risk. It's the knowing that the staff member that you've got that is a little bit discontent because they're doing some work that they don't enjoy doing. Suddenly you've given them back the capacity that they want to do high value work. It's all of that sort of stuff. And then from an efficiency and a profitability point of view, I think over time what I'm seeing, I just had a client this morning text me and say, look, thanks for giving me that advice to do a client experience survey. He had like a 44% response rate and 89 NPS in his survey results. And his clients are loving the work that they're doing for them. But we've been working with this practice for about 4 years. And we've gotten them to a point where now they've got that day-to-day capacity because of the heavy lifting we're doing to really focus on their clients and get that client experience right. And, you can talk about profitability all you like, but as far as I'm concerned, if you're doing the right thing for your clients, your business tends to grow and everything kind of looks after itself from there. So, I feel like we're doing that sort of back end stuff and the top line and front end stuff seems to take care of itself over time, which is what I love seeing.
Yeah, it's not just a profitability improvement potentially, but as you say, it's a capacity release to actually do higher value tasks and perhaps do the things that actually you've always wanted to do and can enhance the client service experience, and consequently you're getting higher NPS scores for those sorts of firms.
I'd also add to that a lot of what we do is challenge businesses as to whether what they're doing is adding any value at all to their clients. So much of what we do is actually observing a process and going, well, I wonder what would happen if you didn't do that. Would a client even care? And so part of what we do is taking on tasks that advisors have, don't want to do or we can do more efficiently or whatever. But another part of it is, in fact, pointing out things where they could be doing something that is a complete waste of time and just sort of challenging them a little bit on things like that.
So a bit of business coaching creeps in there because you've seen what businesses are doing that's working. So you're actually, through lived experience, your business and others, you're actually able to perhaps just help other firms see the best practices that you're seeing and apply those to improve their own business.
Absolutely. And it's whether it comes from us or whether it comes from connecting some of our clients with each other. Some of what we do is, pairing people off and saying, well, you're telling me you want to be better at this, that, or the next thing, but I know, Joe Smith over there is actually great at that. Why don't you have a chat there and see where that goes?
Yeah, great. So obviously it's working well for you and other businesses. So what tasks or aspects of the business of financial planning should really be always remaining in-house rather than being outsourced? What do you do and what do others do that you think really is sacrosanct for the internal team?
There's immediately a couple of things that stand out for me. So one of the things I'd say is, of course, anything client related. So picking up the phone, booking in client appointments, anything related to the relationship with the client, in my opinion, is better served on site by whoever. The other area I would say, which is, in my opinion, I think is better onshore, is the actual transacting. So the placement of transactions in terms of implementing advice. From a governance point of view, we've taken a position as a practice to do that part onshore. That doesn't mean that we don't have the confidence that could be done offshore. We know it can, and many of our clients do get our staff offshore to do that. But, when you're running a larger business with, 600 odd clients and complex portfolios and lots of transactions every single day, we've simply taken the view that, we can do that onshore and we feel more comfortable knowing if we make a mistake, it's on us. Yeah, I'd say that's the other obvious area where people make a choice on how to do things.
Great. And I'm sure that certainly resonates with me as well. So you talked a bit earlier about the fact that what perhaps makes your business at Aptium Assist a little different to others is that you really are not trying to just compartmentalize tasks and just pick those sort of very finite jobs and do them, but really become an embedded part of the team. So can you perhaps just expand on that a bit more about how maybe your service proposition differs from other providers such as VBP and 5Elk and others that are in this space that have been there a little while as well? Do you have a sense of what those others in the market are doing relative to what Aptium is doing?
Very much so, absolutely. So a lot of the work we pick up is, people have worked with others, it didn't work out or whatever it might be. So look, we can deliver the same services as everybody else, and that's fine. So if people just want financial plans done, so that's fine, we can do that. And we do that for the odd client. Also, administration is very much similar to our competitors. If you want a dedicated person, that's fine, we can do that. It's the little things where I think we do them quite differently. So a good example is, let's say on the admin side, if someone wants an admin person dedicated, often what the case is with our competitors is you get given a person, you get charged a flat monthly fee, and then good luck training them and off you go. And then, a year in, they might get promoted and suddenly the cost has gone up, or they've been moved on and you've got a new person or whatever, That's a really typical scenario. We look at that and go, how can you run a business like that? It doesn't work. I mean, being an advice business, if we had a person that got substituted out because they were promoted or another business, it just doesn't make sense. So for us, we say, right, we will take on the training of new staff. So if you want an admin person, that's fine. We'll have someone ready for you in 2 weeks. And you just give us a task list and let us know what you need done, and they'll do it from day one. Now, of course, they're not going to do it because they're not trained to do it. So what we do is we bring in one of the really experienced team leaders to buddy with them for a period of time. That could be 3 months, 6 months, whatever it takes. And our team leader will get your work done on day one and train the staff member on the job. And that way, you've constantly got 2 sets of eyes on a business. So if anything ever happens to that admin person, you've got the team leader that can step in and train someone else and do it and provide that sort of continuity. So that's the first really big difference, I'd say, is, it's fundamental to us. This concept of key person risk and completely removing it is fundamental to everything that we do. So we ask practices to treat us like a black box. You will give us the work and it will get done, and you won't have to concern yourself with who gets it done. We're just going to manage that from training to execution. So that's conceptually, I think, how we're different in terms of no key person risk. The other area is organization and how we organize work. So I mentioned at the beginning that our paraplanners are skilled in a whole lot more than the production of advice docs. And there's and most of our clients actually take up this kind of offer. So there's a couple of benefits of doing things in a way where your paraplanner or paraplanning team are the people that get you ready for your reviews and produce your advice and do the post-presentation cleanup in Xplan and all that kind of stuff. The first obvious benefit for that is advisors don't have to worry about the review process at all anymore. That's just done by a team, and you don't have to worry about, is it a paraplan or is it admin, or is it a complex plan or a simple plan, or how long is it going to take me to fill in my SOA order form or whatever it might be. It's just go and see your client and we'll do the rest. So that's a pretty cool way of organizing the work. But the benefit for us as an outsourced business is that our staff not getting bored churning through SOAs. We're getting them focused on 1 or 2 businesses, but they're managing the entire review process. So they're doing bits and pieces of work that make sure that they're learning constantly. They're getting a bit of diversity in terms of the work that they're doing, and they're critical to those advice businesses. So our sort of pod structure of paraplanners, they're really ambitious guys. Most of these guys are degree qualified. They've either done degrees in Australia and moved back home to Ho Chi Minh City, or they've got local degrees and they want to do something in life. So we're giving them that opportunity to do stuff that is really not dog's body work. We're encouraging our staff to be thinkers, to spot holes in plans and think about strategies the advisor hasn't thought of. And so it's, we've got a couple of CFAs, believe it or not, in the team. Not CFA 3, they've done their CFA 1, level 1. We've got 2 of those. And I'd say that's the biggest difference, is the quality of our people, the way we organize the work, and then the fact we try and avoid key person risk.
For sure. Can you share perhaps a real world success story of a firm, a financial planning firm that significantly sort of improved their business by outsourcing to you, whether it's your own business? Obviously you were the first cab off the rank, but perhaps another, and share a little bit about what were the key outcomes for that business.
I'll try and make it really fast and do 2, so I can think of 2 totally different examples. One I can think of, the earlier one, timeline-wise, was a sole practitioner, where he was at that point in time, he lost his only staff member. He was a great planner, great advisor, sound advice, but just disorganised and at risk of being, let's say, exited by his licensee. And so by taking on basically every back office function, so everything from paraplanning to implementation, in the space of 1 year, his business was unrecognisable. His X-plan was unrecognisable. We had every client with all of their data fields updated. So it was completely squeaky clean, and compliance was no longer an issue for him because we were helping him follow the bouncing ball. So that was probably the earliest example I can think of. But in terms of a larger business and more recent, so in, let's say, September of last year, we had quite a large client, 3 advisors, about 400 clients, Melbourne-based, and they, at that point in time, were getting us to do 30, just their overflow, their new clients, basically, 30 plans a year, and that was it. In September or October last year, we were at a conference with them. They tapped my business partner, Phil, on the shoulder and said, listen, we've just lost 2 staff at the same time. Can you go from 30 to our whole business? And that was like a Thursday or midweek at some point. And by the Monday, we were running their whole business. So they've still got onshore staff, but we are doing all of their review prep, all of their advice docs. Their implementation, actually, they're doing in the Philippines. So they've got 2 staff in the Philippines. They used to be with 5Elk, who you mentioned before, but they've been with them for many, many years, like 5 or 6 years. And again, that's something that we're entirely okay with. Sometimes you'll outsource with 2 different parties, and we've got to work out a way to make that all hang together. And again, when you're diligent around workflow management and you've got that codified in something, in our case, Monday.com, it makes that, pretty seamless.
Yeah, great. Wow. What can you think of one of the more surprising or unexpected benefits that a client of Aptium Assist has shared with you, having made the journey to outsource offshore some of their support services?
I'd say the more surprising benefit is for integrated businesses. So we look after a accounting and advice business, and it's really, really interesting to see them shift their focus and go from just using us for paraplanning to actually you guys could be running everything. So all of our outsourcing for the accounting and the advice business. Now, we don't do outsourcing for accounting at all. We're getting requests for that from some of our clients. But yeah, that's surprising to us that people are asking for services we don't even provide yet.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, obviously you're doing something right if people are saying, can we do more than you're already doing, and trying to think of ways they can utilize the service. You've given us a really good understanding of just how effective outsourcing through Aptium Assist can be, Jerry. I've just got one final question for you, I guess, and it's a bit of a wrap-up question. Financial planners that are considering outsourcing, what do you think the most important factors that a planner should be thinking about or evaluating when determining if it's right for their business?
I think the first thing is be really, really clear about what problem you're trying to solve. What is it that you're trying to get done? Is it that you're trying to be more profitable? Is it that you're trying to not have the burden of managing staff or replacing key staff or supporting existing staff? I think if you're really clear about your why to begin with, that helps to answer everything after that, because there is always a compromise. There's always a compromise. You could say, okay, well, actually, I'm just trying to save on costs. I'm really, at a loss here, and I need to cut somewhere. Now, if that's the case, that's fine, but you typically will get what you pay for. And so the quid pro quo there might be, in fact, that you're saving a bit and you're getting cheap plans, but in fact, you might find that the quality of the plans is inconsistent, or you've got someone fantastic today, but they get switched out in 6 months' time, and the next person is, a blank slate kind of thing. So I think, there's a real clarity that you need to get to in terms of understanding what you're solving and why. And and similarly, I would say we're not necessarily for everyone. So, there are practices that we've spoken to where they sort of say, the cheap plan is really all I want. And we kind of look at that and go, that's okay. And we can do cheap plans, but actually we can add so much more value in a different way that it's not a great source. It's not a great utilization of our resources. We can do a better job elsewhere. So we're okay saying occasionally no to prospective clients.
Yeah, so really know why you're going in initially, at least having a why at the front end if you're going to consider outsourcing. But as I think you've outlined very effectively today, once you do begin to outsource some functions, people will often be thinking, I can now see more of what you could do for me. And so it is, you might have an initial why, but it becomes more than the initial premise. Before long, they're actually doing a lot more with you that is perhaps not what they originally approached you for.
That's right. And yeah, you've just got to test things. I think going all in is okay. It's not impossible, but you're taking a bit of a risk as an advice business that you've chosen the right partner. So if I was in their shoes, I wouldn't do it. I'd absolutely want to validate that the choice I've made is the right one, and I can see the benefit of partnering with anyone. But the other thing, I guess, is none of this stuff is a one-way street necessarily. I think as an advisor, I'd encourage people to do something. Doing something and testing something is better than doing nothing. I think being open to what could be is a great mindset generally in business. And yeah, we certainly employ that in our own practice. We're doing different things all the time. We're not assuming we know best. We learn from some of the practices that we work with. We exchange information all the time. And yeah, being open-minded is a good thing.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jerry. I really appreciate you spending some time today to illuminate a little bit more about your service and how it might support financial planning businesses like ours, like you are with others already. And appreciate you taking the time to give us a bit of an understanding of that. And thanks for joining us on the Trusted Advisor podcast.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening and learning with us. For a complete list of episodes, show notes, transcripts, and more, go to thetrustedadvisor.com.au.